Hello. Today we're starting a new series on Mars and the signs. Mars is where the chart stops observing and starts moving. It describes the part of you that responds when something must be pursued, defended, resisted, or confronted. It is the force behind initiative, appetite, urgency, and action. When there is pressure, desire, competition, or a challenge to overcome, Mars is usually involved. A lot of people hear Mars and immediately think of temper, sex, conflict, or ambition. Those associations are not wrong, but they are incomplete. Mars is really about how your inner drive gets expressed in real time. It shows how you go after what you want, how you handle resistance, how you react when your will is tested. This placement says a great deal about the way a person uses energy. Some people meet life head-on and would rather deal with consequences later than hesitate too long. Others conserve their strength, study the situation, and act only when they feel ready. Some respond instantly. Some build slowly. Some are fired up by challenge itself, while others need purpose, loyalty, emotion, or strategy before they fully engage. That variation is part of what Mars explains. It gives shape to instinct. Not the polished side of personality, not the version of you that has had time to think everything through. The immediate response, the surge that appears when something matters, when something feels threatened, or when the moment calls for courage. Because of that, Mars is closely tied to conflict, but it is not limited to conflict. It also describes determination. It describes nerve. It describes the raw capacity to act instead of staying frozen. This is the part of the chart that can fight, but it is also the part that can protect, pursue, build momentum, and push through fear. It tells us how someone exerts force, how they claim space, and what happens when frustration begins to rise. And that is where the sign becomes important. Mars does not express itself the same way in every sign. The sign changes the tempo, the tone, and the style of action. It changes how quickly a person moves, how directly they assert themselves, how they deal with obstacles, and what kind of environment brings out their strongest effort. In some signs, Mars becomes immediate, blunt, and hard to miss. In others, it becomes careful, contained, relentless, strategic, or emotionally driven. The urge may still be strong, but the way it comes out can look completely different. That is what this series is about. We are not just looking at who is aggressive or who is passive. We are looking at how drive actually functions through each sign. What sparks it? What throws it off? What makes it effective? What makes it reactive? And what happens when that energy is used with maturity versus when it runs unchecked? Mars can be one of the clearest indicators of how a person gets things done, but it can also show where they waste power, turn against themselves, or keep repeating the same instinctive pattern without realizing it. So as we go through Mars and the signs, the goal is to understand the deeper mechanics of the placement. How it moves, how it wants, how it defends, how it pushes, and how it can be used with more precision and self-awareness. So let's begin with Mars and the signs. And remember to like and subscribe if you want to follow the series, and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart. Mars in Capricorn. Mars in Capricorn does not usually waste time, proving it is serious. You can feel it. There is often something contained about this placement. Not cold exactly, though it can look that way from the outside. More like the person has already decided that energy is valuable, that effort costs something, and that throwing themselves around dramatically just to make a point is usually a poor investment. This is Mars with a long memory for consequences. It does not only ask, what do I want right now? It also asks, what will this lead to? What will this build? What will this cost me if I do it badly? What will it earn me if I do it well? So right away, the style here is different. Mars is the part of the chart that shows how a person goes after what they want, how they handle pressure, how they respond when there is resistance, and what kind of force comes out when life demands action. In Capricorn, that force becomes disciplined, strategic, restrained, and highly aware of structure. This is not usually impulsive fire. It is directed fire, the kind that knows how to conserve itself until the moment matters. That is one of the strongest things about Mars in Capricorn. It often has a real relationship with timing, not in the Scorpio sense of emotional calculation and not in the Libra sense of social choreography. More like practical timing, structural timing, the understanding that power is not only about passion, it is also about placement, about knowing when to push, when to hold, when to wait, and when to make a move that actually changes the situation. Because this Mars usually wants results, not just heat, not just drama, not just the feeling of movement. Results, something real to show for the effort, something measurable, something that lasts longer than the mood of the moment. A person with Mars in Capricorn often feels most themselves when energy is going somewhere useful, when progress is tangible, and when the work has direction. That can make this placement look extremely composed, sometimes even intimidatingly composed. Not because the person has no feelings, not because they never get angry, not because they are above wanting things. It is just that Mars in Capricorn often does not like being ruled by whatever it feels in the moment. It wants command over itself. It wants competence. It wants to know that if a situation becomes difficult, it can meet it without falling apart or exposing weakness too carelessly. There is often a lot of self-control here, but it is not always effortless. That is important. People sometimes assume Mars in Capricorn is naturally calm because nothing seems to leak out. In reality, there can be a very strong will underneath that calm. A lot of drive, a lot of hunger, a lot of pressure, a lot of need to achieve, protect position, build security, or prove capability. The difference is that this placement usually prefers to channel all of that into performance rather than display. It would rather do than announce. And when it is healthy, that is one of its greatest strengths. Mars in Capricorn can be incredibly reliable under pressure. It often has the ability to stay functional in situations where other people become emotional, scattered, reactive, or overwhelmed. It can prioritize, endure, focus, keep going, keep building, keep carrying the weight long after the excitement has disappeared. That kind of stamina is not flashy. It is still powerful. Actually, it is often more powerful than the louder forms of drive because it can survive the boring middle, the unglamorous phase, the repetition, the responsibility, the long stretch where nobody is clapping and the reward is still far away. Mars in Capricorn understands that achievement is not usually built on one heroic moment. It is built on consistency, discipline, and the willingness to keep moving when motivation is no longer doing all the work. That is why this placement can do very well in the world. It often knows how to organize effort, how to pace itself, how to turn ambition into structure instead of just fantasy. Even when the person is not obsessed with career in the obvious sense, there is usually some part of them that wants to become strong through mastery. They want to know they can do hard things. They want to know they can hold responsibility. They want to know their effort can create a stable life rather than just a dramatic story. And there is usually pride here too. Not loud pride, not Leo-style radiance, not Aries-style immediate confidence, more like earned pride, the kind that comes from competence, from proving to yourself that you can handle what other people avoid, from becoming the person who can be counted on, from building enough authority within yourself that you no longer need to convince everyone else you have it. That can make Mars in Capricorn deeply impressive. It can also make it very hard on itself, because one of the shadows of this placement is that self-worth can get tangled up with performance. The person may start feeling valuable only when productive, respectable only when composed, safe only when in control, deserving only when useful. Rest can start to feel suspicious. Vulnerability can start to feel expensive. Wanting something too openly can feel naive, because what if wanting makes you exposed? So instead of revealing the full intensity of desire, Mars in Capricorn may work around it. It may turn longing into goals, turn emotion into strategy, turn anger into discipline, turn fear into over-preparation. That can be effective. It can also become lonely, because there is a real humanity underneath this placement that can get buried under all the competence. Mars in Capricorn often has strong instincts, strong appetites, and strong emotions, but it may not always trust those parts of itself unless they can be managed and put to work. It can become so skilled at self-command that it forgets it is allowed to be raw sometimes too. That tension shows up very clearly in anger. Mars in Capricorn usually does not waste energy exploding over every little thing. It often has a high threshold. It can tolerate frustration, hold back reaction, and keep functioning while something bothers it. That makes people think it is endlessly patient. It is not endlessly patient. It is often simply controlled. And those are not the same thing. When this placement gets angry, the reaction may not be immediate, but that does not mean the anger is weak. In fact, it can be stronger because it has been contained. Mars in Capricorn often does not want to lose face, lose leverage, or lose direction by reacting too soon. So it may keep going, keep observing, keep noting the pattern, keep filing away what is happening while everyone else assumes the issue is gone. Then one day the line is crossed, and the response can be extremely firm. Not always theatrical, not always loud. Sometimes that almost makes it worse, because Mars in Capricorn can do anger in a way that feels final, decisive, like a door shutting, like a verdict. By the time it shows, the person has usually already processed the feeling in private and moved on to action. This placement gets especially angry at incompetence, irresponsibility, disrespect, wasted time, broken agreements, and messes other people expect everyone else to clean up. It has little patience for laziness dressed up as charm, manipulation dressed up as weakness, or excuses that appear whenever accountability is required. There is usually a strong relationship here with standards. That can be a strength when those standards are used to build something real. Mars in Capricorn pushes itself to be capable, solid, and dependable. It wants to be someone whose actions hold weight, someone who can be trusted, someone who does not fall apart when life gets demanding. But if the placement becomes too rigid, those standards harden into severity. Then everything becomes a test. Every mistake becomes evidence. Every pause becomes failure. That is when Mars in Capricorn starts losing warmth. And warmth matters more here than people think. Because beneath the steel, there is often a strong need to feel respected, secure, and rooted in a life that actually holds. This placement may not ask for reassurance in obvious ways, but it usually cares deeply about trust, consistency, and whether people mean what they say. It values loyalty, but often shows that through action rather than emotional display. In relationships, Mars in Capricorn usually does not want nonsense. It is more interested in substance than spectacle. Attraction can be strong, and desire can run much deeper than people assume. But this placement usually wants something it can respect. Something with backbone. Something that can survive real life. It is not always seduced by excitement if there is nothing underneath it. There is often something slow burning here. Not disinterested, not weak. Slow burning. The person may take time to trust and reveal the full strength of their desire. But once they do, there can be a great deal of loyalty, steadiness, and seriousness in the bond. This is usually not a Mars that enjoys chaotic inconsistency. It wants something it can build with. That can make this placement deeply dependable in love. It can also make it guarded, because Mars in Capricorn often does not want to be foolish. It does not want to be played, misread the situation, or invest heavily in something unstable. So it may hold itself back until it feels more certain. It may quietly watch whether the other person is consistent, mature, capable, and actually able to meet what they say they want. When secure, that creates discernment. When insecure, it creates distance. Sometimes this placement can become so focused on staying composed that it forgets intimacy requires exposure. It is not enough to be responsible and dependable if the deeper self never truly arrives. Relationships need more than loyalty in principle. They also need warmth, presence, revealed desire. That is one of the core lessons here. Strength is not only restraint, it is also trust. Trusting that you can let someone matter without losing yourself. Trusting that being affected does not make you weak. Trusting that desire can be expressed without ruining your dignity. When Mars in Capricorn learns that, the placement becomes less defended and more powerful at the same time. because then all of that discipline, loyalty, and seriousness is no longer being used only to protect the self from disappointment. It can be used to build something real, a real bond, a real career, a real life. In work, this is often one of the strongest Mars placements for leadership, long-term effort, and practical achievement. Capricorn understands structure, the climb, delayed gratification, and how to carry responsibility without constant emotional drama. This can be excellent for business, management, law, finance, engineering, strategy, operations, administration, politics, entrepreneurship, or any field where pressure and accountability are real. Mars in Capricorn often does well when there is something to master, improve, organize, or build that others will actually depend on. It often respects hierarchy more than some other Mars signs do, but only if the hierarchy is competent. Mars in Capricorn can work within systems very effectively, but it usually has little genuine respect for authority that is weak, sloppy, or unserious. It tends to believe rank should be earned. If leadership is foolish or careless, this placement may become deeply unimpressed, even if it stays outwardly controlled. And if it decides it can do better, it may quietly start preparing to do exactly that. There is often real ambition here, sometimes obvious, sometimes private. The person may not always talk about what they are building, but they are often building something. A position, a reputation, a future that gives them enough stability and autonomy that they do not have to live at the mercy of other people's chaos. That survival instinct can be deeply useful. It can also make it hard for the person to stop. Mars in Capricorn may keep pushing long after enough would have been enough. It may become excellent at bearing weight and terrible at putting weight down. That is why the lesson of softness matters here too. Not softness as weakness, softness as restoration, the ability to rest without guilt, the ability to want without calculation, the ability to feel without turning every feeling into a task. At its best, Mars in Capricorn is disciplined, capable, steady, loyal, strategic, and deeply effective. It can turn pressure into progress, stay focused, and meet responsibility with maturity instead of panic. At its worst, it can become rigid, controlling, emotionally shut down, overly guarded, work-obsessed, punitive, or so attached to self-control that it forgets life is meant to be lived, not only managed. So, the growth here is not about becoming less driven. It is about becoming more whole. Let ambition serve something human. Let discipline support life instead of replacing it. Let desire breathe instead of locking it in a boardroom. Let strength include feeling, not only containment. Because the real gift of Mars in Capricorn is not simply endurance. It is meaningful endurance. The ability to stay the course. The ability to make effort count. The ability to turn will into form. Mars in Capricorn does not need to announce its power every 5 minutes. When it is mature, the power is obvious. It is in the steadiness, the follow-through, the standards, the self-command, the quiet certainty that this person can carry what they commit to. And that is formidable. And if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe so you can follow the series and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart.